You're listening to a CNA podcast.
There were two of them. I felt like one of them was listening in and kind of looked interested, and then the other person was doing the scoffing thing.
Wow.
And then later I got the job as well. So I was very confused because I was thinking to myself, so exactly at which stage did I pass? I didn't feel like it was the best job interview. I didn't feel like I put my best self forward.
At the interview, they looked like they didn't want to be there. The person questioned why I was interviewing for the role, and the person said this: "We don't need someone like you."
Hi everyone, it's Tiffany and Gerald again. Welcome back to another Work It episode. Recently, one of our episodes did very well, and it's about looking out for early signs that your company is retrenching. We saw a few layoffs in the news lately, and definitely there are still some jitters. We hope that you have found that episode useful, and if you haven't listened to it yet, you can find it wherever you are listening to us.
Speaking of usefulness, we have an Ask Me Anything segment right at the end of the main discussion, and there's also a video version of this on YouTube and on Instagram. So if you prefer to have a visual of us,
Ding!
or you're curious to see what we look like, head over to the CNA YouTube channel or Instagram page. So Tiffany, what's the Ask Me Anything question for today?
Today's question is about workplace bullying, and it was sent in by our listener Cindy, who has been the target of gossip in her workplace. She wants to know if what she's going through is indeed bullying and how can she handle it.
Wow, okay, I think gossip, it can really cause a lot of unhappiness, and it's something that we should talk a lot more about. But besides that AMA question, Tiffany, I know today's main topic was inspired by another listener who sent in a question.
Yes, so that listener is Spring. So Spring sent in a question about his job interview journey, and he wanted some advice. As I was reading it, I thought, you know what? I'm sure you and I, Gerald, we can unpack it together and share not only our experiences, but also perhaps give some tips on the do's and don'ts of job interviews.
Okay. So it's about job interviews.
Yes.
So the story for Spring is that Spring has been going for several interviews, now over several months, and has a career coach helping him, but has not yet received an offer. So Spring wants to know whether there are ways that you can gauge an interviewer's enthusiasm, whether through their body language, the tone, language patterns, or even just what happens in the interview.
I mean, all of us want to ace our job interviews, right? We have spent time and effort to put in our application, prepare for the interview, and we want to be that person who gets picked. But let's break down this very big topic of the do's and don'ts of job interviews. We'll do this in 3 parts, okay, Gerald? The preparation, and then the interview itself, and then post-interview. And I think it's also good to give tips on in-person and also virtual interviews, because we're doing a lot more virtual interviews now.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know whether we should be talking about bad interviews first.
Oh,
Tiffany,
okay.
what's your own experience with job interviews?
Okay, actually looking back, pretty much all the job interviews that I had, I didn't think that I was going to get the job, but I did get the job. So for the first one, I remember it was a very last minute job interview. So I got a call and then HR said, "Are you free to do a job interview?" I said, "Yeah." And then she's, "Okay, we have everybody on the line right now." It was done remotely. I was very surprised because I was obviously not prepared. And I try and, what they say, smoke my way through. When it came to this point where they asked me about any story ideas I would like to pitch, I just pulled out some things that I have been having at the back of my head without researching on what the company has already done.
Okay.
During the interview, I remember I didn't feel that enthusiasm. Like, you can sense the enthusiasm from the job interviewers, even on the other side of the phone, right? I couldn't feel it. I just felt like everybody was just, okay, oh, is that it? These are the kind of things that I kept hearing. Then after the job interview, I went to just quickly do a scan of what kind of stories they have done so far. And I realized that most of the stories I pitched, they had already done it. So I felt really stupid. I just thought to myself, they're never going to, hire me, because obviously I came across as very ill-prepared. And then the second one, I remember the body language wasn't great. The person who was interviewing me kept giving me the, that kind of tone. Yeah, a bit of that. But then, I don't know, I felt that because there were 2 of them, I felt like one of them was listening in and kind of looked interested, and then the other person was doing the scoffing thing.
Wow.
And then later I got the job as well. So I was very confused because I was thinking to myself, so exactly at which stage did I pass? So I didn't feel like it was the best job interview. I didn't feel like I put my best self forward.
And I think that's a very important perspective to learn from your own experiences.
Yeah.
Sometimes what happens at the interview stage, your feelings right after the interview, it may not be the outcome. It might not signal the outcome
Yes.
that will be eventually the result of the job interview. It could turn out not good. It could also turn out good as well. In your
Yes.
case, both of them turn out to be job offers.
What about you? Do you have any bad job interview experiences?
I'm not as lucky as you. I had one. I remembered this one that I attended on my birthday.
Oh.
Yeah, so I took leave on my birthday to go for a job interview. Oh, okay. I won't say which employer was this.
Okay.
And at the interview, it really looked like the person didn't want me to be there.
Oh, did it look like they didn't want to be there as well?
Yeah, they
Okay.
looked like they didn't want to be there. The person questioned why I was interviewing for the role. And the person said this actually, we don't need someone like you.
Mm.
Yeah.
So why did they call you back?
So this was like a referral. And then I know that, okay, that's pretty obvious.
Okay.
So very obviously, I didn't get a call back.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
they were doing it a bit begrudgingly, like as a favor for this
Yeah.
referee.
So I think in my situation, they had to carry out the interview as a formality. And then they just try to keep it as short and as curt as possible to tell me that, you know what, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, but I'm
Yeah.
so sorry that you had to go through this on your birthday.
But there's also one thing to learn from this as well, right? For those people who are looking for a job, getting a referral into a job interview is actually one of the most effective ways
Okay.
of getting to the interview table, because lots of us, we see resumes, we apply on job portals, but referrals really work. They get you into the interview table, and hopefully your experience will not be like mine, right?
Yeah.
The person hopefully at your interview table will be very receptive to you, and you're not just there to attend a formality interview.
Correct, yeah. So now we've talked about bad job experiences, but let's start from the top, which is how do we prepare for a job interview?
Yeah, that's important. Tiffany, just now you mentioned that you went for one of the interviews
Yeah.
and you felt you didn't prepare.
I wasn't prepared at all.
What would you have prepared? I'm just curious.
So I think firstly, most HR people will tell you who you are meeting during the interview. So they will introduce, they will say, okay, this so and this person has this job title. And then there is so and so, the boss of this team that you're applying for. Then there will be me, the HR partner, who will be listening in on this conversation. So knowing their names, I'll quickly jot them down if it's told to me over the phone. If not, it will be in an email. I will CSI them first. I will find out, okay, what are their experiences? Where are they from, really? Right? Where they're from, I guess, would also help you to maybe start pulling out stories of commonalities. If they're from Australia, and if you've done, like in my case, if I've done stories in Australia before, maybe that's something that I would like to mention during the interview. If I know that they have a particular focus or a particular interest, maybe that's something I want to front load during the interview, because bearing in mind, they're not going to sit there and interview you for 1 hour. You just want to make the best first impression.
Knowing who's interviewing you is really important. So if they don't tell you, if today someone's getting an interview call or an email and it's not written who is interviewing you, you should really ask.
And I think it's perfectly fine to ask.
yes.
When I was talking to some friends about it, they say, you mean you can ask? I say, why not?
I think also knowing who's interviewing you, besides CSIing them to know their background, there are a few benefits to it. The first one being that you mentally prepare yourself for who you're going to meet. You don't get overwhelmed by them. Sometimes you wonder who's going to interview you, and if you go into the room, you suddenly get shocked, by the number of people there or the seniority of the people there. So knowing in advance prepares you mentally. The other benefit of this really is you can see by the seniority, you can also guess how many stages, as in like how many more interview stages would there be. So if today 3 people are there and they include the middle and the senior management as well, then you know that, okay, how many levels of interviews would there be more? Gives you a sense, and how many more rounds of interview you have to go through. I've heard of people also, interestingly, having interviewers that are not from the department that they're interviewing for.
But usually this happens in higher roles, right? That you apply for.
It might be high roles, even for more junior roles also, I see that, because sometimes they might find that the HR might surface your resume to 2 departments and say that I think this candidate will be good for either. And then 2 department heads will come down and then they will kind of decide like who want to pick you up. I've seen that before.
So don't be intimidated. Think of it in a positive way and see it as, hey, it could be a chance that this company might still hire me, but maybe for a different role.
Yeah, of course, it could also be because there will be an impending reshuffling of portfolios. The incumbent and the successor, they are both at the interview table. Could be that as well. There's lots of reasons, but don't be surprised that the people there are not from the department you're applying for.
So safe to say, we definitely also need to know what the job is that you're applying for, right?
Yes.
So be well researched, knowing what this job entails, the industry that this company is in, and then you can look through the skills that you have had, tailor some of these very carefully according to the job description.
Yeah. Very often the job description, we don't know how accurate is it.
I tell you, some job descriptions don't make sense to me.
Yeah.
I understand individual words, but when put together, I'm like, huh?
Because maybe the company is using their own jargon and you don't understand, or maybe they might say a process or word that has different meaning to different people.
Exactly.
Right?
Correct.
For example, if you say auditing processes, you might think auditing processes of a certain way, but maybe in the company it's a totally different context.
Exactly.
Right? And of course, that's really going deeper into what the job role entails. And surely, these are things that you should clarify through the interview process. But, besides researching on people that are interviewing you, I think it's also important to CSI the company a little bit to know what's happening there. Doing homework about the company's development by following their social media, their LinkedIn and their Instagram if they have one, to see what have they been up to. What I'll typically do is I will search for their employees who work in the company and then see what are they posting about. I might follow hashtags that the company uses to get a sense of what's interesting for them. You might want to also read up if they have annual reports out online. You can take a look at those things as well.
I must confess, I probably wouldn't be able to understand the annual reports.
Yeah.
But I get what you mean. It's saying that if, let's say, you get a sense that the company is moving towards AI, maybe that's something you can also highlight during the interview as part of selling yourself.
Yeah. What I always look out for in reading annual reports, besides those developments, projects that they're doing, things that they're very proud of, I also want to look at structures.
Okay.
If some annual reports, they would write how the different groups within the company, how they structured. So it allows me to understand the business on a larger scale.
So you saying that then you would know where their focus is for the year.
For the whole company, it's useful for us to know what are the pillars of the business and also the role you're applying for, where it fits in.
True.
Yeah, so you get a sense of, the larger picture. This is, of course, for people who just really want to know a lot more about the company. Personally, I find it useful because it allows me to take conversations into those directions if I need to. So do your research on the people, do your research on
the companies. Yeah. Okay, and also do your research on salaries.
Yes, do the salary research because they would most likely ask you.
So we talked about this in the previous episode, right? About why salaries are kept secret. Actually, we have also realized that maybe it's not all too opaque. It's a bit like a door, right? The door is a bit ajar. You can see a little bit, take a peek. And some of these places, I would say, you get a good idea of, say, some salary benchmarks. Certain industries will pay how much. Mercer puts out this report every year. Glassdoor is also good. Just to get a sense like, okay, if I want to ask for this salary, can this company pay me? Am I asking for too much?
Yeah, I think when we go into the interview stage, we should have a number, a figure or range in our minds.
Yeah.
We should have already researched that. And this is based on your own study of what the industry is paying for people in those similar roles. You want to check out job listings, what they indicate as the range for salaries. MOM, Ministry of Manpower, has got a salary scale website. So you can go there and do some research. And basically, you're trying to get a range in your mind to say that, okay, a person doing this role in this industry should expect
for
a
how
pay
many
like
years?
this.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have that in your mind. And when they ask you, you can tell them that's your expectation. That's not your last round, but that's your expectation and you hope that you can stick to that. But of course, as we mentioned before as well, not revealing that too early can help you a little bit more as you progress in the interview stages.
Okay, there are also other things that we have to prepare for before an interview. The frivolous part, very important to me. Plan an appropriate outfit. I think it sends a signal to your interviewer how seriously you also take them because your interviewer is going to turn up in office wear. I don't think you have to put on a shirt, coat, tie, but make it industry specific. So even in the media industry, I would say smart casual, I think is good enough. So that's one. And then for the other thing is that if it's an early morning interview, please set multiple alarms. If you need to, make sure your family members, your dog, your cat, all know that you're going to be turning up for an early morning interview because the last thing you want is to prepare everything and then turn up late and not even get a call back after that.
When you say cat, I'll just imagine in my mind the cat sitting on your face asking you to wake up.
Yeah, I'll be like, wake up!
Yeah. The thing about the attire is important. My advice is really to go one up on top of what they usually wear. And one helpful tip that I used to tell my clients is if you're unsure, just head down to the office itself. Okay. Just go around the office.
Oh, like a recce trip.
Yeah. And then just wait in the lobby and you just observe the people going down and out. You don't know whether the employees are there. Sometimes maybe the lanyard you can tell if it's MNC. But you're just there to observe the people around the area. What do they typically wear? Yeah. So if you come to One North area, you notice that the dressing is very different from Raffles Place. Yeah. So you get a sense, okay, how do I need to dress up? Yeah. And of course, according to the seniority of the role as well. Yeah. If you are coming in as a junior officer, right, I think having a coat and a tie is a little bit overkill. Yeah. Depending on what role you're applying for as well. But generally an overkill. So you want to be appropriate. And of course, other frivolous things that are just important. I would advise my clients is to bring extra copies of your resume. And this has happened before, that at the interview table, sometimes they are not so organized. They come in, then they are like, okay, we are late for the interview already. So then there's no resume. The HR person says, I sent you your email already. And the person doesn't have a laptop because laptop is flat. So those are the situations where you say, look, I brought extra copies I can share with you.
These are just like bonus points, It really makes them feel that like, oh, you are so on top of it, so conscientious. You are somebody who...
Come prepared.
Yeah, you think of the little details.
Yes, and of course, if today you're doing virtual interviews for the earlier rounds, please check your camera. Check your camera, check your microphone. There's nothing more frustrating than for an interviewer to have someone looking down or the person is looking up at your nostril for those interviews, and bad sound, cannot hear you, choppy audio. I think those are really very irritating.
Let's get on to the second part, which is the interview process itself. How would you make your best first impression, Gerald?
Just going in and saying hi. If they stand up and they want to shake your hand, do the same. But if they don't, if they remain seated, just don't go over to shake your hand.
It's not a wedding dinner.
Yeah, and also because you don't know what they have gone through before that. Maybe they're just not comfortable with shaking hands because, I don't know, post-COVID, people are like, handshakes. You got to read the body language, read the room a little bit. Just come in, say hi. If today they are very friendly, they stand up and they move towards you, you go towards them and you shake their hand. If not, just go to the seat and say, can I sit down? Or is this the chair? Yeah, then have a seat and get ready for the interview.
Now, the part about what Spring is saying, which is, I think Spring thinks that the whole job interview is done well, but maybe there were certain non-verbal cues that they have picked up and felt that something is wrong here. I was talking to some of my colleagues as well, and I said, okay, were there certain non-verbal cues that you have seen that made you feel, I'm not going to get this job, right? So one of them said that the interviewer didn't even look them in the eye for the entire interview. Firstly, I think that's rude, but you can't change how that person reacts to you. Maybe it's not you that this person is not interested in. It could be that they have had a bad day or there are other things, there were other considerations, something that's on their mind. Yeah. But I think that's a good way to see that this person is just not interested.
There are many reasons why they would not want to lock eyes with the interviewee. But generally, I agree with you about the part being rude. Again, it might not signal that it's a lost cause.
True, like in my case.
Yeah, because most of the time as an interview panel, most of them, they want to be as poker face as possible.
Okay.
And sometimes the way they do poker face is really the extent of not looking you in the eye. Okay. Yeah, but actually they pleasantly inside their heart, they're like, okay, this is the right guy. It could be that.
They want to play hard to get, is it?
Yeah. The other way, of course, is maybe because they've already found someone already.
Okay.
And that
they don't want to give you false hopes.
Yeah, they don't give false hope, so they're just trying to signal to you that we're not planning to go with you. Other things besides the eye contact will be like they're not forthcoming with the answers.
Okay.
You're asking them questions, they're giving very short answers, and they don't seem very committal. Or even the interview becomes very short.
Yes.
They ask you very direct questions, but they don't seem to probe further into your experiences. Then you know, hang on, I'm not saying enough about myself. You're not asking me questions about myself.
You don't want to know more about me. You're just telling me things, right?
Yes, correct. So I think the better measure could be the depth of your discussion, right? How much of your experiences have been explored to help them to understand what you can offer to them.
Sometimes it's also about the kind of questions they ask, like you say. So it's not just about short questions, right? Sometimes it could be questions that they know will be off-putting to you. So another colleague of mine said that she's single and she went to this interview, and one of the first few questions they asked her was, when are you getting married? Knowing that the impression that they're going to give her is, this is not an employer I want to work for. So in a way, it's like the quiet firing before the quiet firing.
Yeah, but just now we were talking about this as well, Tiffany, right? Sometimes in interviews, there's this like bad cop and good cop.
Yes, the bad cop, good cop theory.
Yeah, sometimes one person is just there to
jolt you.
Yes, to poke your buttons a little bit. And then there's another person there to smooth things over.
Yeah. So I think for my job role, maybe they were looking for people who have a bit more opinion, who can also handle stress. Because in the role of a journalist, handling stress is a very huge component of our daily work. I felt that like every time whenever I'm in front of an interview panel, there will be that bad cop who always ask me questions to stress me. It's like a stress test to just see exactly when I'll break. And when I break, how will I respond to it? Of course, that is unique to my position. And I'm sure that in many other companies, the way they stress test may not be in this case because you don't want a person to have to fight back. I think I once actually said, this is not the only job that I've applied for, that I have other options. Like, please don't say that. I think I snapped, but I said it in such a cool, calm, collected way.
Yeah. Sometimes it might not even be like intentionally bad cop, good cop. It could be really, the team culture is really like that.
Okay.
For example, it could be in the interview, someone speaks to you in a maybe more condescending tone or more direct tone. It may not just be an act. It could be the department really is like that.
Yeah, then you have to decide if this is something that you can deal with.
Yes, correct. And also, I think they are just trying to be themselves from the office to help you to understand also this is how we work. We are basically very direct, very fast-paced, and we speak our minds. And if you cannot take it or you crumble, the hiring manager might feel that maybe don't have the good vibes from there.
So in a virtual interview, how do you know if, something is not right besides all the non-verbal cues?
So virtual interview is a bit harder because you can't really see the person fully.
Correct.
You really have to hear maybe their tone. That's the only thing you're going to get because you only see your face, right?
Yeah.
And the voice,
Or
the
sometimes
tone.
not at all. What if your interviewer turns off their camera?
Oh my goodness, that's the worst.
So that really shows that they're not interested, right?
That's rude. That's plain rude because you are asking the other person to turn on the camera,
Yes.
but you are turning off your camera.
Yeah.
I think to me as an interviewee, that's not a good sign.
Okay, in the interview, right, we always get this question, what is your biggest weakness? So
okay.
what is an honest answer that is not going to sabotage your chances?
Yeah, I feel like this is where you might want to draw it back to the job and say there are certain parts of the work where you may not have had as much experience before, or you feel like you can learn a lot more in. So tying back to the job rather than to yourself.
Okay.
I think this helps the employer to understand a few things. Number one, that you have looked through the job description and you assess yourself against what they're looking for. Number two, it also sends a signal of believability. A lot of people at interviews, they want to say that I can do everything you ask me to do, but if it's too good to be true,
It's impossible.
yeah, so then I think it shows the employer that you're self-aware,
Yeah.
that there are certain areas of work where you feel like you may need a little bit more support in, or you might want to learn more on your own or with their support. So I think those are good areas. Of course, if you can't reference a job description, maybe you can talk about learning from a mistake that you made before. You could say something that happened in the past job, but emphasize more on how you recovered, how you grown through it, and what you learned from it. I think those are good ways.
So are we to bring our real self to an interview process? And by real self, I mean that if we happen to be people who are very opinionated or we are a bit more bossy, should we bring that self to the interview?
That's a very good question, Tiffany. I honestly think it's also in relation to the CNA article that I read recently about career identities. At the interview table, when you're there, what they want to hire for is for your work self, right? Which is like what you have done, what you can do. But I think what gets you across the line or what gets you ahead of other people is that true self, the real person inside, besides the work identity.
So it's not about what they want, but you have to show a bit of who you are as well.
And that would help you to seal the deal or move ahead just a little bit. So if today you're just a little bit more bossy, I think it's okay to show that side because maybe that's what they need, right? But don't overdo it because for interviewers, what they're trying to get at the end of it is besides being objective, right? They also want to get a sense of you as a person because they're not just working with you on your work. They know that they have to talk to you, they have to have fun with you, have to collaborate, argue with you as well. So they want to know who's the person behind all those skills.
True.
So I think bring that human side into the interview, very important.
And then when the tables are turned, what are some good questions we can actually ask the interviewer? I feel that we can ask, what has kept you in this job for so long? The other thing I've also experienced before, and I think it's also a good way to ask the interviewer is, if you are put in a situational test, so earlier on, you asked me about this situation. I gave you my answer. I am now interested to hear what would you have done.
Yeah.
Because next time, if I'm to report to you, I know whether or not you want me to give you a call if I hit a problem, or do you want me to try and manage it by myself? Do you want me to try and be more collaborative with my team members to try and solve the problem and don't look for you? So I think these are good questions that you can ask them.
In a related note on that, you can also ask them, of course, what are the qualities, the experiences that their ideal candidate will possess. Because they've been interviewing you as if you are the ideal candidate. Now you're turning the tables around and you're asking, so if today they can choose to design or create their ideal hire, what are they looking for? You could even ask them a little bit more about the previous person who left. If it's a replacement role, you might ask what would they have wanted to change to see more of from that person who left. So then that gives you a clue a little bit about expectations, whether this is something that you want for yourself. It also gives you a little bit of clue how they talk about the previous person who left.
Yeah.
If you see like anger, gossip a little bit, then you know, okay, that's the kind of environment you're getting yourself into.
True. Should you ask about how many days can you work from home?
No.
Really? Because
Not
now
yet.
a lot of young people would say, okay, actually it's a very big thing for me. It's a make or break thing. So I'd rather ask right at the beginning, how many days do I have to be in office for?
I say no straight away because I think these are questions that you want to ask a bit later,
Okay.
right? Not at the beginning. These are valid questions, but I think you can ask them a bit later.
Not at the preliminary stage.
Yes, correct. And you have to ask yourself, if today these questions are important to you, how many days in the office, then you also have to balance with this job itself. You have to be fair to the employer. They're also looking to hire someone, right? Which one is a little bit more important? How do you swing the balance? Are you just going to cut them out just because they don't have work from home policies?
Okay.
Yeah. And also, these work from home policies, sometimes you can find out online for yourself. If today the aim of the interview is to get ahead, to stay in the game, right? Then these are the questions that you maybe want to hold off for a while.
Okay, now post-interview, what are some good practices? Obviously, something that people always say is to make sure you follow up with a thank you note. So it could be if you have been talking to an interviewer over text messages, I think it's okay to just drop them a text message. I feel that the best practice in this day and age would be to drop them a formal email just to say, thank you so much for your time. Really hope that I will hear back from you. Are there other things I should put in that email?
Yeah, you can certainly thank them. And then after that, you could indicate that you want to check in 1 week later.
Okay, so give like a timeline. Otherwise, you might not hear back from them and then everything just ends up in the abyss.
Sometimes they do forget to close a loop. So you might want to say, I'll just check in 1 week later to see, if there's any progress.
Yeah.
I think it's okay to check in. Use LinkedIn if you can, because sometimes the hiring manager, you don't have their email addresses.
Oh, true.
So if you want to, you can connect with them. Although they might be a bit dubious, a bit suspicious of whether to connect with you.
True,
right?
Because what if they have to break up, quote unquote, with you?
Yes, correct. So I think what you want to do is through LinkedIn, you can personalize a note. You might just want to initiate a connection with them and say, I enjoyed the interview today. I hope to make a professional connection with you.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay.
Yeah. So don't follow up other than that. I think only reach out to them again much later. If today, for example, you realize that you didn't get the job already, then you want to ask them like, can you give me some feedback?
Yeah.
Because that's what a lot of candidates want. Tell me where did I fail? And then this will really be on the person, whether are they a nice person they want to tell you or not.
Yeah, whether they're busy also. I think if I'm not so busy, if I'm a hiring manager, I would like to give very honest feedback to people. And the fact that they're asking me for feedback shows me that they want to improve themselves.
Yes.
And it actually creates an impression. So something about that person sticks in my memory.
Yes.
So then when there's another role that open up, I will actually think to myself, okay, this person actually is interested in growing.
Yes.
I would like to see whether this person is free again now that I have a role that is available.
Yes, and that's actually very common. So what you're trying to do is to build that connection.
The stickiness.
The recall, improve the recall for that person. So they remember like, hey, I got this other role, or our ideal candidate didn't take up the role.
Yeah.
And I'm going to look to my second and third choices to step up now.
True.
So I'm going to call you back. So it happens.
Yes.
So don't think that everything is just limited to the interview.
Yeah. Well, I think today we've really laid out a lot of very good tips that maybe people might be listening to this and then quickly taking a notepad and then start jotting down. I have learned so much. And especially for spring, I hope that you finally get the job that you like. Let us know if there are other questions that you have. Here's sending you all the good vibes from the CNA podcast team. Welcome back to yet another Ask Me Anything segment where we take on your questions. And today's one was sent in by our listener, Cindy. Now, Cindy says, my colleagues have been talking behind my back over the last few months, but recently also explicitly means she's able to hear their conversations about her. They're saying untruths and bad things about me. One of them in particular is close to the head of the department. This person seems to be immune to having any action taken against him or her. Is this considered workplace bullying? And what is your advice on how to handle this?
I don't know enough of the situation to say whether Cindy's situation is really that of a workplace bullying. Workplace bullying can be quite serious. It's like harassment, threats, intimidation, or even socially being excluded.
Yeah.
I think that can be considered as workplace bullying. But in this case, it really sounds like from how she described the situation, it's quite clear that Cindy is the subject of office gossip. She is often the topic of interest to her colleagues, talking about her behind her back, and maybe saying mistruths about her or saying things about her in a negative way. That's quite certain. So when it comes to office gossip,
It's quite common, right?
yeah, we all face it, and sometimes we hope we don't face it because
We hope you're not the subject of it, right?
yeah, exactly. But some people can deal well with them, some people cannot. The people that I met before, they take it quite seriously because sometimes it affects their motivation to whether to stay
And
or
to
to
even
go.
turn up for work also, it
Yeah.
affects them.
Yeah, correct. So I think office gossip, while may not be quite the workplace bullying, but it's still quite serious because
Yes.
it does affect people emotionally as well. So I think there are a few things that Cindy can do, certainly in this situation, because it's not easy. One thought I have is about confronting the person. But Tiffany, what are your thoughts about
Okay.
confronting?
I don't know Cindy enough to know whether this is something that she'll feel comfortable with. But personally, I would actually speak up. I would confront the person. So what I'll do is go up and say that, I know you're talking about me. That is not true. And then you can either choose to leave it as that, or you can say, would you like to talk about it? I think sometimes just taking back the control and saying that I know what you're trying to do already changes the power dynamics. Firstly, it empowers you to feel that you are not the victim here. So you are saying, I see you, I see what you are doing. It is not true. Is there anything you need to address with me? I think sometimes that already makes the person in question that you're talking to reflect on their actions. Because if they think that, oh, this is very harmless, they're just saying things because it's funny, then they realize it's not funny. You don't think that it's funny. So that would be what I'll do in terms of confronting the person in question.
Yeah, so if we break it down a little bit more, right? if the situation happens, would you go out to the group that's talking about you and address it immediately, or would you be like waiting for the conversation to be over, then you pick like, maybe the main person?
Go for the head.
The head, yeah.
Well, it depends on how bad the situation is. If the whole conversation seems to revolve around this one person and this person is feeding the group all these, lies, then I will go up to the person. But if I feel at that point of time brave enough to walk up to the group and say, hey guys, are you talking about me? Like, I can hear you, definitely someone in the group will feel very embarrassed.
Yeah, I think calling out, confronting, and just to bring this up in front of them is not easy.
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
It's
So
very difficult.
adding on to what you shared, right? Maybe just bearing in mind for Cindy, if she confronts the situation, to not react, but to respond, like how you have explained, just to call out the behavior. If Cindy doesn't feel ready to respond, and if today she confronts them, it's going to be a reaction, like a shout or something, right? Then maybe better to hold back.
Yeah.
And then later on, when emotions are a bit calmer, then you look for the head.
Before even confronting the people, I think it's also good to first assess what is being said.
Yeah.
Because if it's totally untrue, honestly, it shouldn't affect you so much because it's not true, right? But sometimes it hurts because there is some element of truth in there.
Yes.
Or you feel that it will change the way other people who don't know you view you.
So there's the saying, right? There's no smoke without fire. So it could be true. Some of the things that they might be saying, it's good for Cindy to maybe take back and think about, is there any truths behind that? Is there anything that she might have done to make people behave or react that way? I think it's important to have that self-reflection point. And if there is, then maybe it's better as part of the confrontation to also apologize.
Yes,
to
true.
own up, to say that I have my part to play in this, but what you did, it was not also right.
Yeah.
Of course, the other aspect of this is like the social dynamics, right? Because this person is gossiping with other colleagues, so then you feel like you're being excluded.
Yeah.
So I think what Cindy could do is also to look out for positive company.
Okay.
Look out for people who were
Allies in the workplace.
Positive relationships within the company, right? Other people who will take your side, who know what's really happening. You can go to them and share what has happened. Very often I see people would say, thank God for this colleague who's there to listen to me, because if not, I don't know how I can survive in this workplace. So yeah, go and find those positive relationships and reinforce them. And if, of course, things really are bad, please go report it. Go to the HOD, go to look at your HR harassment policies, and then follow up appropriately.
Yeah, so Cindy, I can imagine that you're dreading to see these colleagues every day. So hopefully you'll be able to find some resolution. Be brave if you need to confront them, if you need to talk to them, like what Gerald say. Don't react, respond. Hopefully that changes your situation. Be brave. And if, like Cindy, you have a work-related question, do send it to us. We are at cnapodcasts@mediacorp.com.sg. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, where a video version of this is at. The team behind the Work It podcast is Crispina Robert, Joanne Chan, Junaini Johari, Saya Win, Arjun Bala, and To Yen Yun. Sound mixing is by Carrie Lim, video by Hanida Amin. Before we end this episode, I just want to quickly say that we're taking a short break in December, but we'll be back in January 2025. In the meantime, we're putting together a series of best-of episodes from this season, so you can still catch up on some of our popular topics.
I'm Gerald.
And I'm Tiffany. Have a good work week ahead.